Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 448, Reigning Over Contempt, Part 8, The Topography of Virtue and How You Achieve Mastery. The podcast objectives are analyze why it is important to get to the root of every problem, analyze the topography of virtue, and reveal how you can succeed the valley of decisions. Get to the root of the problem. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 285 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we analyzed how we obtain great virtue. Enter fiery preaching. Now, despite this fact, there is a gross shortage of fiery preachers in this nation, which lends itself to why there is also a gross shortage of virtuous women and honest men. It's because the majority within this nation are averse to fiery preaching. The million-dollar question is simply, why? To wit, fiery preaching is the only way we can obtain great virtue. My dear friends, it is the only way we can achieve the first node of transformation in our quest. And yet, the majority within this nation are averse to fiery preaching and fiery preachers. Why? The answer is sure, and I will offer it as an inflection point. This is one I advise you to bookmark. Fiery preaching is designed to burn out all the impurities and defilement within your heart. To achieve this goal, it must attack these impurities and defilements at the source. This, my friends, is what it means to get to the root of the problem. Now, that was the inflection. Here is the problem. Vis-a-vis, the root of the problem is not only fortified with a spiritual stronghold, but it is also firmly fixed within your heart. Ergo, it will eventually become ingrained within your character. Here lies the problem, a huge problem. Vis-a-vis, many are averse to changing their character for two primary reasons. One, they are in love with themselves, even though they are severely flawed. And two, changing your character is like spiritual surgery. For Yahuwah's will is to purge out every character flaw within your heart with fire. For this is the only way your character can be renewed in the likeness of Yahushua Messiah. Now, although the purging of your heart by fire is indeed Yahuwah's will, it is not the will of all his people. Quite the contrary, the majority within this nation will never endure the process by which our hearts are purged by fire. Trust me, they are spiritual lightweights who cannot endure spiritual surgery. Listen to me. Although the upshot of spiritual surgery is the highest degree of living, the process by which we are purged often feels like dying. Now, I'm not saying this to discourage anyone, and yet I speak in the spirit of honesty. And in the spirit of honesty, I desire to make this one thing very clear. The fiery purging of your heart is not some trivial matter. Quite the contrary. And as I have said before, it is one of the most difficult procedures you will ever endure. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, Yahuwah is going to kill out every facet of your being that is not aligned with his spirit and his will. Not only this, but the preferred manner of death he has chosen is death by fire. Isaiah 4:2-4 is revealing, in that day, the branch of Yahuwah shall be splendid and esteemed, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for the escaped ones of Israel. And it shall be that he who is left in Zion and he who remains in Jerusalem is called set apart, everyone who is written among the living in Jerusalem. When Yahuwah has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and rinsed away the blood of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. Now, this passage confirms that those of us who escape Mystery Babel and enter the renewed promised land will be set apart to Elohim. This begs the question, how do we become set apart to Elohim? How do we ensure that he will deliver us from Mystery Babel? And how do we surely know that he will bring us through the great distress and he will establish us within the renewed promised land? My dear friends, the answer lies in the same passage I have just read. It begins with the spirit of judgment, which is designed to evaluate what is in our hearts. Then comes the spirit of burning, which is designed to purge out every matter that would prevent us from being set apart to Elohim. Then at last, Yahuwah can wash away the residue of our purging, to wit, every trace of lawlessness that calls us to sin against him, to put us in the best position such that we should sin no more. And this, my friends, is how you get to the root of the problem. This, my friends, is the power and purpose of fiery preaching. It is how we, the watchmen of Israel, are drawing those the Father has called us to be reaching. The topography of virtue. Now, for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, this should not be a foreign matter to you, even if it is a foreign matter to the rest. Look here, for the full duration of this ministry, I have been quite clear, preaching this truth to one and to all, that we all owe Elohim our life, and we all owe Elohim a death. Along these lines, we can die now to our flesh, our sinful nature, and all those things that are contrary to his righteousness, or we can die later, ergo forever, ergo for all eternity, and become fools for endless death. My dear friends, it's a very simple and straightforward choice. To wit, we can die now and live forever, or we can live now and die forever. And so, what will you do? Will you follow the path and open the door that leads to everlasting life? Or will you follow the path and open the door that leads to death? To be or not to be, my dear friend, that is the question. As for the answer, it is front and center in understanding the topography of virtue. If you recall, we analyzed the topography of faith and obedience in prior podcasts, and we determined that faith is symbolic of a super forest, and obedience is symbolic of a range of mountains. Along these lines, the topography of virtue is a series of valleys situated at the bases of the mountains which correspond to obedience. And although you might think that this should not be a difficult stretch of your quest to travel, it will be harder than you realize. Here is why. As obedience leads to virtue, the mountainous nature of obedience not only creates a maze like network at its foundation, but the corresponding structure makes it impossible to ascertain the boundaries and pathways within the maze. Along these lines, the mountains of obedience are so high, there is no way for you to determine where any stretch of any path leads with your natural eyes. And this should be no surprise, for this is the nature of faith. And while Yahuwah gave you the power to see through the darkness by the phenomenon of spiritual sight. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, you will need spiritual sight to make it through this maze. Remember, virtue is an expression of faith. Ergo, you cannot succeed virtue without employing the spiritual faculties that allowed you to succeed faith. Now, the element of spiritual sight speaks to the procedural model of succeeding this maze. Notwithstanding, it does not speak to the conceptual model, to wit, the overarching structure that is created at the intersection of obedience and virtue. As you might expect, this is a truly fascinating matter to study. And although I would love to invest a series of podcasts analyzing it, time is of the essence, always of the essence. Then again, this is the final podcast the Ruach has led me to share on the topics of virtue and contempt. Ergo, we will constrain ourselves to analyzing the critical points of this matter, and then we will conclude this podcast and this powerful series on virtue and contempt. Let's get started. Your worst impulses and your darkest desires. Now, first things first, our understanding of the conceptual model of the topography of virtue will increase our understanding of every other model. And so, right off the bat, I can tell you that virtue is not just any valley. Quite the contrary. Virtue is a valley of decisions. Along these lines, virtue is like unto a maze, which has one entranceway and one exit route. The valley then is illustrated by a near infinite number of passages within the maze. And your entry onto any given path within this maze is validated by the output of the most critical process that transpires within your heart and your entire being. Enter decisions. Decisions, decisions, decisions. Now, we have spent a great deal of time in the past 3 months analyzing the critical nature of decisions as it pertains to our victory over contempt. Vis-a-vis, we have revealed how the decision-making process leads to the formulation of intentions. And we have also revealed how our intentions are the basis for all our actions. And thus, we concluded the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of our choices. To wit, your life is what you make of it. Your life is what you decide. No doubt, this admission puts the spotlight exactly where it belongs. That is, your life decisions. explicitly the decisions you make concerning the Father's will. The following inflection point reveals why. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. There is only one way to get out of the maze and survive, and your decisions will determine whether you make it out or not in time. Before you start to say to yourself, I make good decisions in my life, so navigating this maze should be a piece of cake. Let me tell you something. The complexity of this maze is greater than any other passage you will ever encounter in your quest. Trust me, that's saying a lot, for we are barely on the second level of the pinnacle of holiness. Brothers and sisters, there are 13 more levels and intervals we must succeed to achieve our goal. And yet, we have already encountered the most complex passage of the 16 primary degrees of holiness, and we still have a long way to go. Now, let me tell you something else. Even if you do have a history of making good decisions, you must always appreciate the circumstances. To wit, anyone can make a good decision in a low stakes, low stress situation with little to no complexity. And yet, what we have here at the intersection of obedience and virtue is the most complex valley of decisions you will ever encounter. And although there are many reasons why, I will only address three. First and foremost, the valley of decisions has an infinite number of passages. For every decision you make in life creates a new reality, which results in a new passage. And yet, every passage you fail to take is yet real. It's just not your reality. Now, although many of us fail to consider this in our decision making process, our subconscious mind is aware of these infinite possibilities, which increases the levels of pressure and stress within our mind and our hearts, which makes it more likely that we will choose unwisely. Trust me, the majority of men and women don't perform at a high level when they are under duress. Likewise, we don't make better decisions when we are severely stressed. Quite the contrary, we often make bad decisions when life bears down upon us and we are sorely and persistently pressed. The reason why is sure. It's because stress has an adverse effect on our decision making process. Trust me, it is impossible to guard your decision making process if you are being plagued by stress. Here is why. Stress is designed to neutralize your thought dimension, which creates a clear path for stress to enter your heart. And once stress has entered your heart, it generates immense levels of agitation, which are designed to trouble all the actors and faculties within your heart. Now, the key word in this inflection point is agitation. If you recall, agitation is a degree of lawlessness which promotes instability. Not only this, but it is at the heart of instability. It is the focal point of this phase of lawlessness. Along these lines, agitation sets you on a death track, for it leads to impatience, discouragement, discontentment, displeasure, depression, division, disappointment, distractions, disorder, disillusionment, distress, anxiety, disturbance, control, and imbalance. Now, I want you to consider all the degrees of lawlessness I just named, from impatience to imbalance. Now, ask yourself the following question. Can I consistently make good decisions if I am constantly being plagued by these degrees of lawlessness? If you are being honest with yourself, then your answer, like mine, is no. And here is the thing you must consider vis-a-vis, you open yourself up to each of these degrees of lawlessness when you allow your heart to be agitated. This, my friends, is what I specifically called out stress. Look here, even though stress is not a degree of lawlessness, it is a primary driver of lawlessness. And it is primarily driven to cause agitation in our hearts. Here is why. By disrupting every actor and faculty within your heart, agitation will cause your heart to take on a chaotic nature that is much worse than the chaos you experienced at the first. Here lies the problem. To wit, this unparalleled level of chaos cannot be regulated. Ergo, you would lose every feature of virtue you have previously unlocked. And without the powers of these features regulating your heart, there is no way you can make a good decision. Trust me, it is quite impossible, for your decision making process will be marred with chaos, and your choices will once again reflect your worst impulses and your darkest desires. The only way to make good decisions. Now, that was just the first of the three reasons I said I would address to validate the complexity of the valley of decisions. And trust me, the second reason is just as problematic as the first. To wit, there is a time factor associated with navigating this maze. Along these lines, you can't put off a decision forever just because you don't want to make it. As the saying goes, time waits for no man. Ergo, we have no time to waste, for the time will come for you to decide. The appointed hour makes haste. Now, if you don't think time is a complex factor, let me tell you something. Time is often the most complex factor in our decision making process. Trust me, many of us who have lived life long enough will often lament over a difficult reality, which I will offer as an inflection point. Consider this. There are many times that we will find we would have made a better choice if we had more time. Trust me, in our subconscious mind, we get this. And so, what do? Alas, we'll often follow one of two distressing paths. On the one hand, we will ignore the time factor and we will fail to decide by the appointed time. And regrettably, this will often lead to personal derision. For even if you fail to decide by the appointed time, you, my friend, have yet made a decision. On the other hand, we'll be over focused on the time factor and the feeling that we don't have enough time to make an informed decision. And thus, I ask again, what do? You guessed it, we make bad choices. Why? It's because our stress levels are increased when we are forced to make a decision under duress. For we are convinced that the choice we make under these circumstances will not be our best. And we are right. Trust me, our best choices are not made in a cordial environment filled with stress. Now, this brings us to the third and final reason why the valley of decisions is so complex, and it may be the most difficult factor of them all. Ergo, I ask you to consider the following inflection point, my friends, and be advised. lest you are sure to fall. In addition to the infinite possibilities and the time factor, you will be consistently forced to make key decisions in your life with limited information. Now, if you consider how there is an element of faith and obedience in every phase of your quest, this makes perfect sense. To wit, as faith is a forest, there are stretches in your quest that are void of light, and you cannot see the path before you. Likewise, as obedience is a series of mountains, you should expect that there will be patches of darkness in the valleys. That being said, allow me to recap the three factors of complexity associated with the valley of decisions we addressed in this podcast. One, there are infinite paths you can take. Two, you have a limited amount of time to decide on a path. And three, you are lacking key pieces of data, which makes it feel like you are walking in the dark. Now, here again, these are only three of the many complex factors of the valley of decisions. Trust me, there are many more. And thus, the question of the hour is simply this: how will you succeed this complex stretch of your quest when so many have failed? The answer is sure, and we analyze it in our lessons on obedience. If you recall, in End Times 395, Reigning Over Disobedience in Doubt, Part 5, which was posted on December 30th, 2024, we analyze the high stakes associated with navigating the mountains of obedience. And believe me, the stakes associated with that crossing are immensely high. And yet, the stakes involved in succeeding the valley of decisions are even higher. Notwithstanding, the solution for handling pressure and stress is the same regardless of the stakes involved. And I shall bring it to remembrance, and I trust you will recall. The only way you can succeed in high pressure situations is by unlocking a key feature of the spirit of Elohim, which manifests itself in the model of a clutch gene. Now, for the sake of time, I will not delve too deep into this matter. And yet, I encourage you to re-engage that podcast whenever you have the time. Trust me, it is not only a powerful word of truth, but it is also one of the best podcasts I have ever created. That said, the thing you must consider about the spiritual clutch gene as you are traversing the valley of decisions is sure. And I will offer it as an inflection point. And then we will conclude this podcast and this series on virtue and contempt. Consider this. When you unlock the power of the spiritual clutch gene, you are guarded in the perfect peace of Elohim. And this is the only way you can operate at the highest level, even when confronted with the highest levels of pressure and stress. This is the only way you can consistently make good decisions, even when you have limited information about the infinite paths in question and only a limited amount of time to decide. So remember this word, hold fast to this truth. You have the power to make your heart clean, to make good decisions with this living proof. You, my friend, have unlocked the spiritual clutch gene. These are the words of virtue. Now, here is the final word. We defeated two foes. Who knows where they went? And now we've defeated the spirit of contempt. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, today is indeed a very fine day. As I said at the beginning of this series, it would be a long way down for us to get to the bottom of what is in our hearts. And I suggested you bring a shovel, for we were barely beginning to touch on the worst parts. And now we've gotten to the bottom of these matters. We've addressed the root of all our heart's problems. And in doing so, we have completed the first half of the work required to free our hearts forever. And all praises to Elohim for allowing us to do this together. And so I'll extend my hand to invite you to continue with us into the next series. Trust me, we've done a great work by defeating the spirit of contempt. But you must remember, contempt is the invading army, and thus we must press the battle to the gates. We must defeat the fatherland. And you will, my friend, and you will not be alone. For look, listen, it has been written, multitudes, multitudes, in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahuwah is near in the valley of decision. Heretofore, I recommend, don't settle for an incomplete work. Your enemies are afraid of your revenge. So rise with me and let us run to the next battle. For Yahuwah is on our side, and we are guaranteed to win. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on all the lessons you have heard this week and ask the Father to give you clarity on anything you are struggling to receive. And if you are led, please feel free to reach out to me. You can fill out a form on our website and let us know what questions you have. And remember, the only question that can truly hurt you is the one you fail to ask. Last but not least, enjoy the upcoming Shabbat and the weekend, and be ready to get back at it next week as we continue to make our calling and election sure in pursuit of the precious and priceless seal of Elohim. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 448, Reigning Over Contempt, Part 8. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 450, An Intro to Prejudice. I will post this podcast on Monday, April 14th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.